Welcome to Fantasia, home of the melodious. My name's Azallea, and today, gonna be bringing you guys another update to my Ritual Beast deck. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into this. So starting off, we are playing 3 copies of Ritual Beast Tamer Elder. Now, Elder is the best Ritual Beast Tamer monster in the deck because of the fact that he allows us to go for an additional normal summon for Ritual Beast monsters. And combined with a Spiritual Beast monster, you can actually go for your contact fusions. So that's why you definitely want to see him in your opening hand, and that's why we want to play 3 copies of him. Now, it's also important to note that each of the Ritual Beast monsters can only be special summoned once per turn, so that's why you have to have a variety of different monsters in your deck. And we'll get into those right now. So next off, we have 1 copy of Ritual Beast Tamer Wen. Now, if you normal summon Wen, you can target one of your banished Ritual Beast monsters and special summon it to your side of the field. This is really good for mid to late game because then you can start reviving the pieces that are banished and then continue your combos and bringing additional monsters to your side of the field. She is also the Tamer with the highest attack, so that's also something important to note. At least the Tamer with the highest attack that can bring something else back. I believe Winda is a little bit stronger, but she doesn't have an effect on summon. Okay, so next off we are playing 1 copy of Ritual Beast Tamer Lara. Lara is phenomenal in the artwork department, but also really good in the in her effect. So Wen could summon monsters back from your banished zone. Lara can actually summon monsters back from your graveyard. So when you normal summon her, you can special summon a Spiritual Beast monster from your graveyard, and she's really good because you don't really want to take monsters out of your banished zone. You want to utilize the resources that are in your graveyard, especially because cards like Rapengu can send Spiritual Beast monsters directly from your deck straight to your graveyard, and that's going to be very effective for you in terms of setting up combos. Graveyard is the resource pile that you're going to tap into the most, I believe, outside of the banished zone, because the banished zone you really want to keep your monsters there so you can continue fusing and defusing by bringing them back from the banished zone. So that's why Wen isn't really too useful in that department, because you really want to keep those monsters in your banished zone to be able to special summon later when you get your fusions on the field. Okay, so moving on, we're actually playing 1 copy of Ritual Beast Tamer Zephyrin Pilica. Now, Zephyrin Pilica is amazing because she's actually searchable with Oracle of Zephyra, and Oracle of Zephyra is being run in a lot of people's side decks right now because of set rotation. The opponent will give you an Oracle of Zephyra, and then hopefully they're going to lock you out of your field spells because you can't flip Oracle of Zephyra unless you have a search target in your deck. Thankfully, for us though, we naturally have a search target in the deck, so if your opponent ever gives you Oracle of Zephyra, just thank them, because you're getting free advantage off of it. Okay, so Zephyrin Pilica is basically the same as Ritual Beast Tamer Lara, where if you normal summon her, you can special summon a monster straight from your graveyard, Spiritual Beast monster straight from your graveyard to your side of the field, and the only condition is that it is actually destroyed during the end phase of the turn, but normally you're just going to fuse with that monster anyway, so it doesn't really matter, right? So Zephyrin Pilica is pretty good. One thing to note is that she is a pendulum monster, so if she does get destroyed when she's on the field, she'll actually be sent to your extra deck and not your graveyard. Most people think that this is what makes her bad, because you can't use her as a resource for fusing and defusing anymore, but with Rapengu, actually, you can banish her from your extra deck. Even if she's face up like a pendulum monster, you can banish her from your extra deck and then send another Tamer from your deck to the graveyard. So there are ways to put her back to circulation even if you do lose her. Okay, so next off we're going into our last Tamer, but she is a combination of both Spiritual Beast and a Ritual Beast Tamer. So she is a Spiritual Beast Tamer Winda. Now Winda is a fantastic card because she's actually a floater for the deck. She has the highest attack of all the Tamers in the deck with 1600 attack, but the most important thing is that if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card, by battle, or by card effect, you can special summon 1 Ritual Beast monster from your deck or your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions, but then of course you can only special summon her once per turn. So you can't continuously float into more and more Windas, but what you could do is float into your ulti Ritual Beast fusions. You can float into any of the Tamers, any of the Spiritual Beast monsters straight from your deck, and that's just a phenomenal thing. You know, being able to bring out a beat stick like ulti Guy Pelio or bring out a wall like ulti Petalfin in crucial times is just a very powerful tool to have. Okay, so that does it for all of the tamers. Next off, we're going to go into the spiritual beast monsters themselves. So for the spiritual beast monsters, starting off with the most important one, we're playing 3 copies of spiritual beast Kanahawk. Now, Kanahawk, once per turn, you can banish 1 ritual beast card from your deck face up, and then during the second standby phase after this effect's activation, you can add that banished card back to your hand. So it's essentially like a gold sarcophagus, but only for ritual beast cards. You don't always have to banish monsters. You can banish the spells or the traps, and you can eventually add them back to your hand, but it's mostly effective to just banish the monsters from your deck. So you set up your banish zone so that you can go for your fusing and defusing combos, right? And if you are looking for a combo guide to this deck, I do have a series of videos that I am planning on continuing with more ritual beast combos, but you can find all of the basic combos already on my channel, so you can go check that out if you're new to the archetype. But anyway, yeah, 3 copies of Kanahawk are definitely amazing, and it's a must-have. It's a staple for the deck. Okay, so the next card that we play is 3 copies of Spiritual Beast Rapengu. 3 copies of this as well because it is also a combo starter piece, as you can notice. So Elder and Kanahawk is probably your best opening hand, but Elder and Rapengu is your second best opening hand. So that's why you definitely want to play 3 copies of him. Very, very important card. So once per turn, you can banish 1 Ritual Beast monster from your extra deck and then send 1 Ritual Beast monster with the same type as that monster from your deck to the graveyard. You can only special summon this card, of course, once per turn, as I mentioned earlier. But Rapengu is so good for not only the interaction with cards like Zephyr Pilica, but also for setting up your banish zone with your extra deck monsters. They give you extra targets for you to actually just recycle back and forth with. We play multiple copies of the extra deck monsters, except for Ulti Kanahawk, because for some reason it's still limited. Yeah, so when you have those extra copies of those fusions circulating around, it just gives you extra resources for your Ulti Kanahawk to work with to go for extra searches. So that's really nice. That's why 3 Rapengu is definitely a must, in my opinion. I believe some people do play 2, but I think 3 is just a necessity. Okay, so moving on, we are also playing 2 copies of Spiritual Beast Apelio. Apelio. I think somebody corrected me the last time I made a deck profile on this. So, Apelio, right? Spiritual Beast Apelio. Once per turn, during either player's turn, you can banish 1 Ritual Beast card from your graveyard, and for the rest of this turn, all Ritual Beast monsters you control will gain 500 attack and defense. Now, Apelio is absolutely fantastic, as it has 1800 attack, the highest attack main deck monster in this archetype, and it can go up to 2300 attack with its own effect, and that's just amazing for clearing out a lot of problem monsters that your opponent might have without risking going into a fusion or anything like that. So yeah, this is definitely a great card. And it also boosts up the attack of your fusions and the defense of your fusions. So Petalfin can go up to like 3300 defense. Ulti Guy Pelio can become really, really huge with this, especially because I believe it starts with like 3200 attack. So with this, it'll become like 3700. It's just a really easy way to swing over most of the boss monsters in this game effortlessly. So Apelio is definitely very good. And it also, again, takes the resources that you set up in your graveyard, either with Rapengu or some other monsters, and then you can banish them and put them into your banish zone so that you can use them for your Ulti Ritual Beast defusions and things like that. Okay, and to wrap up all of the monsters in this deck, we're actually playing 1 copy of Spiritual Beast Petalfin. Petalfin's here for her name. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, names are very important in this deck, so you have to play every single monster, essentially, that you can. And Petalfin has a pretty decent removal effect. It's not too bad. So once per turn, you can banish 1 Ritual Beast card from your hand, then target 1 card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. So against cards like maybe people are playing Wind Witches with Invoked or something, and they make a Crystal Wing that can't be destroyed by card effects, so you can't destroy them with your steeds or anything like that. Petalfin can actually, if you manage to bait out its effect, just return it straight to the extra deck. It's just fantastic spot removal for those very niche situations, right? And that's why she's a pretty decent card overall. So that does it for the monsters. I don't actually play any hand traps in this deck because this is a very, very combo reliant deck and you want to go first. So if you open with your combos, you're going to end up with a very, very strong field with a ton of back row, and hand traps are really unnecessary unless you know that you'll be going second against your opponent. So that's why they're going to be in the side deck and not in the main deck. Okay, so that does it for the monsters. Next off, we're going to go into the spell cards. So for the spell cards, starting off, we are playing one copy of Oracle of Zephyra. This card is making its rounds in the meta right now due to set rotation, like I mentioned earlier, but we actually have very good uses for this card. Not only can you search out the Zephyr Pilica, but it also has the effect of when you special summon one of these types of monsters to your side of the field, you gain additional effects. So if you special summon a fusion monster using a Zephyra monster as a material, you can actually special summon one additional monster from your hand. So that's actually very nice for helping you to swarm the field sometimes. And, you know, if you get that extra Apelio out, or the extra Petalfin, Rapengu, Kanahawk, anything like that, not only do they add damage to your side of the field, but they can add, you know, potential removal, damage boosts. They can set up your banish zone or your graveyard even further. It's just a fantastic card, and it's also a great way to help you enable cards like XYZs and stuff. So if you make your fusion, special summon something out of your hand, defuse with that monster, and bring back, let's say, another level 4 Spiritual Beast monster, you can overlay 2 of your level 4s, go for rank 4, go for whatever you need to do, and then yeah, so it's just a very versatile card in this deck. So next off, we're actually playing one copy of Brain Research Lab. Brain Research Lab is basically just in case you don't draw into your Elder. So if you draw into your Terraforming or your Brain Research Lab, it acts as a pseudo Elder for you to get your combos going, right? If you don't have, if you have another Ritual Beast Tamer in your hand along with a Spiritual Beast monster. So, Brain Research Lab allows you to, once per turn, you can normal summon one Psychic type monster in addition to your normal summon or set, and if successful, you have to place a Psychic counter on this card, and if this card is removed from the field, you essentially take 1,000 damage for every counter that was on this card. So, just, you know, it really doesn't matter that damage that you're going to be taking, because you're really only using this maybe once or twice a duel before it just gets removed or someone sets something over it with set rotation, right? So, yeah. But it's definitely very good for your starting combos, to have another way to get monsters onto your field to go for your initial fusion play. Because the hardest play to make in this deck is actually your first field, okay? So recovery is definitely not too much of a problem, okay? But setting up is definitely the biggest hurdle. Now, in conjunction with those 2 field spells, we're also playing 2 copies of Terraforming, just for a bit of consistency, to be able to search out what we need to. Again, being able to search out the Brain Research Lab for your opening play, if you don't open with Elder, is just too good to pass up. Next off, we were playing 2 copies of Ritual Beast Return. Now, Ritual Beast Return is a pretty interesting combo piece, and I'm going to go into some combo videos with this, combo tutorials with this in the future, but this card is phenomenal for establishing pretty strong boards and going for your extra searches. And it's a great way, again, to establish a board if you don't have Elder in your hand. So this is just another way for us to start our opening plays. Next off, we are also playing 1 copy of Emergency Teleport. Again, the reasoning is just, if you don't open with Elder, this is another way for you to get a Tamer. You can get Lara, you can get Wen, you can get Elder straight from your deck, and then go for your plays there. In fact, this doesn't even require you to have another Tamer or anything else in your hand. All you really need is your Spiritual Beast monster, and then you have Emergency Teleport, and you can go for your first fusion. Okay, and the last spell that we play in this deck is going to be 1 copy of Dimensional Fissure. Dimensional Fissure, of course, self-explanatory. We want our stuff banished, and this card is phenomenal for that. And this is actually really good against a lot of the hand traps in the game right now, because a lot of the hand traps have these sent from the hand to the graveyard, but because they can't be sent to the graveyard because they'd be banished instead, you can't actually activate them. So this is actually really good against this very hand trap heavy meta, as you could see from the YCS Dallas this past weekend. So yeah, Dimensional Fissure is definitely a must. So that does it for the spell cards. Only 8 of them. It's not very much, but most of the bulk from this deck actually comes from the traps, which we're going to get into next. Alright, so going into the trap cards, we're starting off with the main trap in the deck, 3 copies of Ritual Beast Steeds. Now, Steeds is the searchable trap card in this deck that is basically what makes Ritual Beasts so good. You can, if you control a Ritual Beast monster, you can destroy monsters on the field up to the number of Ritual Beast monsters that you currently control. And it doesn't target, and it's so amazing for just bypassing a lot of those protection effects, right? And it's just very, very great for just clearing out fields, especially because you can defuse your monsters on your opponent's turn to add additional Ritual Beast monsters to your side of the field to give you additional targets for you to destroy. Right, so that's always why it's fantastic. Of course, being searchable just makes it that much scarier for your opponent, because they know that you're basically always going to have this card and they have to play around it. The next card that we play is 2 copies of Ritual Beast Ambush. This is the recovery card for the deck, so you can target one of your Ritual Beast Tamer monsters and one of your Spiritual Beast monsters that are banished or in your graveyard, and you can special summon them to your side of the field in defense position. And this card is great in conjunction with some stuff like steeds, because then you get, again, additional monsters onto your side of the field for your steeds to have additional targets to blow up. But also because this, if you activate this during your opponent's like end phase or whatever, then you get additional monsters on your side of the field for you to use on your turn. That you can go for additional XYZs, you can go for link monsters, you can go for whatever you need to at the moment. This is just a great way to swarm your field. And yeah, if your opponent lets this resolve and you have a fusion on your side of the field as well and you can defuse, by the time it comes to your turn, you're going to have 4 monsters on your side of the field that you can just do whatever you need to with. And fantastic resource to have. And also searchable, again, by your ulti Kanahawk. So that's why your opponent has to watch out for this as well. Okay, so the next card that we play, I actually don't have them yet, they're in the mail, but 3 copies of Storming Mirror Force. Storming Mirror Force is fantastic in this deck because your monsters are pretty weak. Even your fusions, aside from Ulti Petalfin, they're pretty weak, and this is just a great way for you to deter your opponent from attacking. Once they know you're playing Mirror Forces, you know, they're going to be more tempted to try to destroy your back row and things like that before they go and initiate an attack. So this can prevent things like OTKs, because this can protect your monsters, and this just disrupts your opponent's overall strategy and board presence. Much more effective than things like Quaking Mirror Force, and much more consistent than something like Drowning. So that's why Storming is the perfect fit for this deck. The next card that we play is 3 copies of Solemn Strike, because Solemn Strike is just fantastic for stopping hand traps. It's fantastic for stopping any type of summon, really. Link summons, pendulum summons, because pendulum magicians are still pretty popular. And yeah, those combo decks like World Chalice and things like that definitely get very hurt if you hit their main combo piece, their main monsters with your strike. The next card that we play, speaking of combo decks and disrupting fields and strategies, we play 1 copy of Torrential Tribute. Now, Ritual Beasts actually have a fantastic interaction with Torrential Tribute. So if your opponent summons anything to your to their side of the field, what you can do is activate your ulti Ritual Beast monster as a Chainlink 1 to return them to the extra deck, and then you can flip Torrential Tribute as a Chainlink 2. So then Torrential Tribute will nuke the field, and then you'll be able to summon back your banished Ritual Beast Tamer and your Spiritual Beast monsters to your side of the field, because returning to the extra deck is a cost. So that's why your fusion's already going to be gone from the field, and then Torrential Tribute basically won't even wipe anything of yours out while your opponent loses their entire board. So that's why that's there as a little tech. So the next card that we play is 2 copies of Lose One Turn. Again, this deck is very fragile in terms of disruption. So if your opponent has like the Ghost Ogres, the Ash Blossoms, anything of that sort, it's really going to hurt what this deck can do. And you more likely than not, you're going to be left in a very vulnerable situation. So that Lose One Turn is actually very good for just stalling out your opponent, forcing them to put their monsters in defense mode to gain their effects, so that you can eventually overcome your opponent's field when it comes back to your turn. Now, we can easily play around Lose One Turn, because we can always special summon our monsters back from our banished zone or a graveyard, depending if you have just your fusions or your ambush, whatever. And when it comes back to our turn, we just put them into attack mode, attack over our opponent's defense position monsters, and then go for our fusions again. Ulti Kanahawk can still search, because as long as you return him back to the extra deck by chaining to his own effect, you'll be able to get that search and avoid the Lose One Turn, because Lose One Turn only applies to stuff that's on the field, right? So we can easily play around this card, and yeah, it's definitely very good. The last 2 cards that we play for our traps, one of them is going to be Imperial Order. Imperial Order allows us to negate all spell effects on the field, and then once per turn during the standby phase, you must pay 700 life points. This is not an optional effect, so if you're activating this, you're basically committing to the duel at that point. So that's why I'm not playing a lot of combo intensive like spells and stuff in this deck, only limiting myself to 8 spells, because Imperial Order is such a powerful card. And Ritual Beasts have enough deck thinning capabilities through like Rapengu, Kanahawk, you know, all the searching with field spells, the searching with Ulti Kanahawk, that you're more likely than not going to be able to see it during the course of a match. So that's why that's in there. And then the last card, of course, we have to play Macrocosmos. Again, very same reasoning as Dimensional Fissure, but this also impacts spell and trap cards as well. So for us, this doesn't really matter too much, of course, because we can't bring back our spell and trap cards. But in the case of cards like Ritual Beast Steeds or Ritual Beast Ambush, or even Ritual Beast Return, the spell card, the quick play spell card that I mentioned earlier, when those cards get banished, you can actually use them as targets for your Ulti Kanahawk to put back to the graveyard and things like that in order to go for your searches. So it's very beneficial to us, actually. While, of course, being more detrimental to your opponent, especially against decks like Spirals and things where they really need their stuff in their graveyard to summon their sleeper, to go for their main combos, to revive things with Big Red and stuff like that. So, yeah, this build is definitely very, very powerful. So that does it for the trap cards. Next off, we're going to go into the side deck. Okay, so for the side deck, starting off, we were playing one copy of Max C. Now, Max C, again, is a very strong deterrent for your opponent to continue special summoning, especially now because people are just establishing huge first-turn boards that are very difficult to overcome. So this, of course, is a very good card to help you gain advantage while they're doing that as well. The next card that we're playing is 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Ghost Ogre, I main deck this card in most of my other decks, but not in this one, again, because we were very combo intensive and we want to see our opening plays. But Ghost Ogre is fantastic for hitting your opponent's field spells, hitting their important monsters that are activating on their side of the field, things like that, right? So Ghost Ogre, very versatile card. You can also special summon it from your deck using things like Emergency Teleport. So even if you don't have it in your hand, you can just special summon to your side of the field in defense position and then deter your opponent from activating certain effects that'll force them to bypass it by, you know, maybe entering their battle phase prematurely or anything like that before they continue on with their combos. So yeah, next off we're going to be playing one copy of Dark Hole. Dark Hole is just really great removal, especially again when you're going second, you really don't want to be disrupted with your play. So if your opponent has very, very strong fields, you want to be able to clear them out. So one copy of Dark Hole, one copy of Raigeki, and then we're also playing 3 copies of Twin Twisters. Now, Twin Twisters is great for just removing your opponent's back row. People are starting to play with Solemn Brigade again. Solemn Strike is going back up in price. You can see its prevalence in YCS Dallas. It's just a fantastic card, and Strike really hurts this deck, especially because Ulti Kanahawk is at 1. So if your Ulti Kanahawk ever gets destroyed, it's basically gone forever. We don't have Daigusto Emerald anymore, so we can't recover our monsters that way. It's pretty detrimental to the deck. So Twin Twisters, clear out your opponent's back row before you go for your fusion plays, because if you lose that Ulti Kanahawk, more likely than not, you've just lost the duel. So yeah, there's that. So next off, we're playing 3 copies of Different Dimension Ground. Very happy that this card got a reprint finally, so I could snag a few copies of these. So Different Dimension Ground says that this turn, any monster sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So not only can you use this like as disruption against your opponent, but you can also use this offensively as well. You know, use this when you have your Rapengu on your side of the field, so that you can banish Ritual Beast Fusion monster from your extra deck and banish whatever monster is in the main deck that you would have sent to the graveyard instead when this card wasn't active. So this is just a fantastic way to just basically add additional copies of Macrocosmos or Dimensional Fissure to your deck without actually playing extra Dimensional Fissure and Macrocosmos. That'd actually be illegal. But yeah, anyway, we're playing 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance to wrap things up. Again, the Imperial Order's in the main deck. It's just a very, very powerful card to shut down field spells, shut down your opponent's Twin Twisters, things like that to destroy your back row. Anti-Spell Fragrance is to side in, especially when you know your opponent's playing a very, very spell-reliant deck. Again, something like Spirals. This will slow them down dramatically because they can't use their big res, they can't use resorts, terraforming, set rotations, anything like that. They have to wait when it comes back to their turn before they can do that. So yeah, definitely a fantastic card for this deck. So that does it for the side deck. Next off, we're going to go into the extra deck. Alright, so for the extra deck, starting off, we are playing one copy of Decode Talker. Now, we don't normally go for links in this deck, and Decode Talker is really the only one that I can think of that really benefits the deck as of right now. Once we get the Wind Link monster, it's going to definitely give a huge boost to us, but for now, Decode Talker is really all we need if you do go for a link summon at all. This deck really just revolves around having one extra deck monster out at a time, and again, you can always get rid of your Ritual Beast fusions by just defusing and then summoning whatever you need to in XYZ or whatever after you cleared out your extra monster zone. So Decode Talker is only there for like those occasions where you have too many monsters on your side of the field, but even then, in that situation, you're probably going to be winning that turn. So yeah, it's just there for if you need it. And so, yeah, that's it for the Link monsters. So next off, we're going to go into some of the XYZs. Starting off, we're playing one copy of Lightning Chidori, fantastic card, and basically a better Castel, at least for this deck. So it requires 2 level 4 wind monsters, which is very easy for this deck to accomplish. And so what we need to do is, if this card is XYZ summoned, you target one set card your opponent controls, return that target to the bottom of the deck. Then once per turn, you can detach one XYZ material from this card, then target one face-up card your opponent controls, return that target to the top of the deck. So this is very great for setting your opponent back for a turn. If your opponent has something like a Dragon Ravine, anything that's dead that's face up, you just return it back to the top of their deck. If they have an extra deck monster, return it to their extra deck. Basically the same as Castel, right? And the most important part is that the first effect allows you to get rid of some back row. So it allows you to get rid of some whatever set cards. Chidori either bait it out or it's going to be successful and it's going to put that target back to the bottom of the deck. This also has a lot of synergy with anti-spell because you're forcing your opponent to set the spell cards they really want to use on their next turn, and then Chidori just puts that back to the bottom of their deck and it sets them back, and they lose so much advantage from just doing that, right? So that's why Chidori is a fantastic card in this deck. Okay, so moving on, we have one copy of number 82, Heartland Draco. Very easy for us to steal games with this. Ritual Beasts do have the potential to OTK, but in those instances where we can't, we usually leave our opponent with less than 2,000 life points. And yeah, with people running a lot of strikes, Solemn Brigades and stuff are being popular now, Heartland Draco is really great for just cleaning things up and stealing the game. Next off, we have one copy of Tornado Dragon, and Tornado Dragon, again, this deck hates back row, so it's just a great way for us to control the field, especially with anti-spell. Yet again, you could just start blowing up your opponent's back row, and most of the time they're going to be spells that they really want to use on their next turn. The next card that we play is another defensive card. It's going to be number 41, Baguska, the Terribly Tired Tapir. And Baguska is just fantastic for stalling out our opponent. Has built-in protection when it's in attack mode, so that's always good. And with 2100 attack, it's not too shabby, but it's also not too great either. But when it's in defense mode, oh my god, it just changes all monsters on the field to defense position, and any activated effects that a monster tries to activate gets negated as long as they're in defense position. So again, it's basically like a walking skill drain that you can turn off by yourself. So that's fantastic. To cap off the rank 4s, we're playing one copy of number 39, Utopia, and the pseudo rank 4, number S39, Utopia, the Lightning, for us to run over all of those pesky small tiny monsters and deal massive big manly damage to our opponent, right? Ritual Beasts have a tough time getting over big monsters such as Crystal Wing, so with things like that, you can always just depend on Utopia, the Lightning, to just run over those. Right, so that does it for the XYZs. Next off, we're going to go into the fusions. So, starting off the fusions, of course, the main monster in this deck is going to be Ritual Beast Ulti Kanahawk. Unfortunately, he's only at 1, so you can only play 1, but it's so fantastic for searching out all of your Ritual Beast cards. And again, like I explained earlier, you can bypass things like lose 1 turn very easily because all of the Ritual Beast fusions can just tag out and special summon one of the Spiritual Beast monsters and one of the Ritual Beast Tamers back from your banished zone. Okay, the next card that we play in the extra deck is going to be, it's going to be like our main attacker for the deck, right? So it's going to be 3 copies of Ritual Beast Ulti Apollo. And with 2600 attack, it can attack over most of the relevant cards in this game. Things like Dark Magicians and things if you're playing more casually. Definitely very easy for us to run over those. The unfortunate thing is that when it's attacking, it's going to be unaffected by all of the card effects. Now, the reason why it's unfortunate because the Spiritual Beast Apollo, when it activates its effect to banish something from your graveyard so that all your Ritual Beast monsters gain 500 attack and defense, that attack boost does not stick with your Ulti Apollo because it cannot, it just negates its its boosts, right? Because it's unaffected by all those card effects once it declares an attack. So quite unfortunate, but you know, we have to make do with what we have. So yeah, that's why this deck has a tough time attacking over things that are over 2600 attack, right? Okay, so moving on, we're playing 2 copies of Ritual Beast Ulti Petalfin. Now, Ulti Petalfin is the defensive card for this deck. With 2800 defense, it's very, very powerful, and it cannot be destroyed by card effects. Now, it's vulnerable to targeting still, but again, if you're being targeted by your opponent's Castel or whatever, you can easily just defuse with your Petalfin and just dodge that. So, basically, she's pretty much invincible, if you want to think about it that way. One of the best cards to have on your opponent's turn, and a very good target to summon with your Winda if Winda gets destroyed on your opponent's turn, because then, you know, you have another wall on your side of the field to protect you. Okay, and the last card that we play in the extra deck, we're playing 2 copies of Ritual Beast Ulti Guy Pelio. Ulti Guy Pelio is fantastic, but it's also very difficult for this deck to summon. You can, of course, summon it bypassing its summoning conditions by just ramming your Winda into one of your opponent's monsters, and then summoning the Guy Pelio from your extra deck. So 3200 attack is probably the only way that this deck is going to destroy monsters that are over 3000 attack. Just without the use of like Steeds. That's why Steeds is a very powerful control card. It's not something that you just use willy-nilly. You have to use it at specific strategic times to be able to disrupt your opponent's play so that they either can't get those large boss monsters out, or you use it to remove those large boss monsters so you can establish control over the field. So Ulti Guy Pelio is pretty decent card to have, and again, it's a very good card to banish off of Rapengu because it's a psychic type, so you can send tamers from your deck to your graveyard as well. So yeah, that does it for the extra deck monsters, and that does it for this deck profile. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, please leave a like, subscribe for more Ritual Beast content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.